was Steve White, Trek Boy 89 for Steve Arts 89. Well, I finished Enterprise and I have to do my episode by episode review. Well, I don't have to, no one's asking me to, but I like doing it. So yes, Stormfront Part 1 and 2. Now the thing with this season is it's probably going to be easier to do because although there's only 2 less episodes for this season, there's 22 episodes instead of the usual 24, they have a lot of mini arcs. So you have less stories. Same number of episodes, but less stories. So like the first story, for example, Stormfront Part 1 and 2. Not a huge fan of it. Basically, you know, the Nazis won and rule the world and there's an alien involved. It's pretty basic. And it's very... I don't really like the time travel episodes where they just go back to a past era and it's really just a costume period piece sort of. And it's just, you know, it seems to be sometimes just a budget cutting thing because they can just go onto the back lot and use the 1920s set or whatever and, you know, pull out the old costumes from the wardrobes and that. And yeah, so there's a couple of good elements to it, but for the most part, and the other issue is it was sort of the cliffhanger for the end of the season. I really felt after that whole season, just episode up episode string along that story, they should have given us a nice clear ending, a nice clear victory, happy ending, and then just, you know, left it for, okay, they're going to go out and, you know, go back to exploring next season. But they had this little cliffhanger and just it had nothing to do with anything. It was just random. And you see they were just sitting there. It's like the end of the Doctor Who that we've got now with no, it didn't work. Now, Home was a nice little episode. It basically just deals with the post-traumatic stress of it all and what happened, and also the reality that Earth has been affected by this, of course. There's xenophobia. We see Section 31, which I have issues with, but at least the way they did it here, you never really know if it's legitimate or not, unlike Discovery, which just turned it into a joke. So they go back to Earth and they're basically fixing this ship and preparing to go out again and trying to reevaluate everything and trying to find the same inspiration for exploring that they did before after having sort of all this happen. Now, Borderland, Cold Station and the Augments is a 3-part episode all about the Augments. We have Brent Spiner coming back and he basically... And I remember this was on Entertainment Tonight and it got a lot of, you know, news because it was Brent Spiner, Data coming back. And he's basically playing his great whatever, who was involved with the eugenics wars. In that, not the original eugenics wars, but he's basically been working on some embryos that were left over that were kept in storage, and he's stolen 19 of them, and he basically was able to hide them, and they've basically grown up, and now they weren't happy just staying where they were and being secret and having their sort of safety and security. They had to go out and conquer the world, basically. It wasn't enough for them just to survive. They had to go out and do something. So they break him out. Well, actually, he's brought out of prison to help find them because they're causing trouble. And, of course, they get him back. And he, of course... tries to be the father again, but of course they can't handle having anyone else rule, and there's no way these people are going to survive because they're just going to eat themselves alive, and eventually there'll just be one of them, you know, on his throne, and that's it. So, you know, there's no hope for these people. And how Soong doesn't see that, and how he keeps denying that, and for a moment blames the nurture element. Like, if I'd been there for them, if I hadn't been taken away by Starfleet and put in prison, they would have been differently. It's like, no, this was genetically built into them. So yes, but some of the best parts are like the Orion scenes, like some of Jolene's stories about that were great, and the actual station where all the diseases are kept and everything. It reminded me of Star Trek 2 a little bit, and so there's parts of it that really worked. Now, The Forge is a 3-part episode where they go back and to Vulcan. T'Pol takes Trip because, and of course her mother's there because her mother has been kicked out of her teaching job because of the controversies over nearly said Jolene, over to Pol. And they end up going and searching for, who was the original Vulcan? Surak. Surak, the original teachings of the original sort of Vulcan, because the Vulcans have sort of strayed from that to a degree. And finding that is the idea of it's going to help to unify the Vulcan people. And you do see a lot of scenes on Vulcan which are very well done. We finally see, what was the name of her? Was it no, not T'Pring, I'm getting confused. It doesn't say her name, I've forgotten. But she was originally supposed to be the T'Pol character, and she was the priestess who eventually we see in Amok Time with Spock. But because they didn't want to pay someone to use that character, every episode they made up T'Pol. So it's nice to see her and to see that character get an episode as her younger self. And now we have Daedalus. It's a one-off episode where the guy who invented the transporter, and I love that they point out some of the issues with transporting, because a lot of people talk about religion in Star Trek and it has a place. I'm like, no, it doesn't, because in science there is no like spirit and religion, and like with the transporter, if you really believe in spirit and everything, no one would be able to transport because they'd be being killed if you really believe that. So there are some things about Star Trek that just work with science, that don't work with religion and so forth. So he had I don't want to ruin it in case you haven't seen it, but he has some issues because he basically killed his son when he was learning, how to work the transporter and work on the technology. So it's all about him dealing with that and trying to sort of redeem himself with like new advancements and stuff. Now, Observer Effect. Oh yes, this is really creepy. A couple of aliens who we learn, one's from the original series, I won't ruin it for you, who basically are just randomly possessing members of the crew to observe how they deal with a really bad situation where one of the characters, or two of the characters actually die. And just the whole humans on trial element. It's an interesting little story, and just the scenes where they're talking in the other humans' bodies. It's just really creepy. It's a good little one-off episode that they did. Now, Babel 1 United and Einar, that's the Andorian arc mini story, whatever. It's really good. Shran turns up, drags Archer into his drama because Archer owes him for helping him save the planet and everything, and save Earth. And they go back to the Andorian home world, and we see they have to go back because the Romulans are trying to make the Andorians and the Tellarites, and they're just trying to cause war, and they've created ships that can work from remote, and they had one of these unique Andorians who are like albino and they're blind. They have special telekinesis powers, and they're being used to run these ships. And they go back to the home planet, and we get to see the Andorian home world, and it's all in ice, and it's just amazing. It's just great. I'm not going to ruin the whole story, but they win in the end. Blah blah blah. Now, Affliction, and Divergence. These are the two Klingon episodes where they deal with the whole original series with the soft, flat, four-headed Klingons versus the ones from the movies in the Next Generation who had the spine and then the ridges. I'd like to think all the ones in the motion picture were the same family who just had a really, really tight spine sort of pattern, and that all Klingons didn't look like that. That's a little bit of headcanon. But they basically explained that the augments, the news of the augments had gone back to the Klingons, and they sort of thought they had to sort of play around with these sort of eugenics to try and get a step up with their Klingons and make them augmented, and it goes wrong, and they basically lose some of their Klingon characteristics, and it's a disease, and they have to cure it. But the ones who are cured are left with very human appearances, and they lose their forehead ridges and stuff like that. So it does explain why in the original series you see Klingons with flat foreheads, and then in other parts you see the Klingons with those foreheads. And the idea also there's a warrior class and a science, education class that has sort of been pushed to the side by the warrior class, but they still exist. So a lot of little interesting things they do with the Klingons in that. And oh god, see, we're nearly over, and there's only like 4 more stories. Now Bound's just a one-off one with the Orions, where they end up for some reason taking 3 women, Orion Green women slaves, in payment for something. And of course they try and take over the ship, because we learn that they are actually the ones who control. They are sent out, by their people, supposedly as property, as slaves, and then they end up possessing the people and bringing back, all their property and land and wealth and everything. So they actually run the show, and they are the bait, and they are the ones running the whole thing. So that was interesting. It was nice to see the Orions. It would have been really nice if they'd had, because they did this in one of the fan films. They had the guy who played the Hulk, Lou Ferrigno, playing an Orion. I wish they'd done that. They had Big Show in the other episode, but this one's just a regular guy. But they do a good job with the girls, and seeing the crew, sort of all the men being possessed and losing their minds, and the women dealing with it. It was a really interesting episode. Now we get to one of the best ones in A Mirror Darkly. Now I hate Mirror Universe stories, I do, but this one had the Defiant, an original era starship. Now we haven't seen one of those since Trials and Tribulations. Well, that was the Enterprise, but it was a recreation of the original Enterprise. And then we did see one in the Star Trek Picard Season 3 episode. Oddly enough, there was also one in Into Darkness. It was in a deleted scene. Hanging up was like a model in the guy from Section 31, his office. So, I mean, he was the traitor, so we know that's what he was, but yeah. So basically they find the Enterprise is crossed over, not the Enterprise, the Defiant is crossed over, so they take the ship, and they then try and use that advanced vessel to defeat everyone else and, of course, take over. And Archer ends up being defeated in the end, and I really wish they'd gone somewhere with, I guess I'll just ruin it. Hoshi ends up taking over the ship and becoming Empress Sato. And like, why they didn't run with, she then was like the great ancestor to Michelle Yeoh's character, I'm forgetting her name, because they kind of did it, but not really. And I'm like, they could have had Hoshi back. There's so many things they could have done with that could have been interesting, but they didn't. But so we get to see an original series, Constitution class. We get to see another couple of decks that we haven't seen before. They realistically use the bridge and the corridors, and they look good. And it just goes against the argument that, you can't use the 1960s aesthetic and designs and all that in modern series, it won't work. You absolutely can use them, probably even without any changes, just good lighting and good cameras and really good, carpentry and that. But even if they just made a few little changes, not to the overall design, but just to some of the details, that would be enough that you could have had that sort of thing. So Strange New Worlds could have looked like the original Star Trek, but just a little bit more sophisticated without changing their overall design and their overall aesthetic. It absolutely could have worked. So they proved that. And it's just great. I just love it just to see. You don't see till the end of the first episode and then the whole second episode. The Gorn is a problem, though. They changed its physicality, and it's made it get a long neck, and they made a CGI version that looks CGI, and they would have been better off just having a guy in a suit with an animated mask and maybe using CGI to make that mask look more real. That would have been a better choice. And then, of course, Strange New Worlds took it even further and made it even worse. So, yep. If you don't want to do these aliens as they originally were, in the style or character or feel that they had, just create another character and leave the ones alone that other people did better. So, yep. Now, we get down to the last 3 stories. Well, 2 stories, last 3 episodes. Demons and Terra Prime, which I always think of as a 3-parter, but it's only a 2-parter. I always think of it as 3 parts. It's only 2 parts. Basically, these xenophobic, they're kind of like kind of future maggots. They have problems with aliens and I guess, anything that isn't, you know. See, this is the thing. What would happen is if they actually did manage to, because what they wanted to do was get rid of all the aliens on Earth, because they thought they were a threat and they just were doing this xenophobic thing. Once they got rid of all the aliens, they just then would have then turned on the black people and the Hispanics, and that's just what these people do. So none of these people can create the actual utopia they claim that they will have if they get rid of the other, because they're always going to create an other because they need someone to hate and someone to work against. And we sort of see a bit of that, but it's not really played out. And there is one chilling scene where this guy's giving this totally racist speech, and there's like a black person, and a Hispanic person, and all these people listening because they are buying into the same crap that was said about them centuries ago, now about aliens. And it was quite a chilling moment, I thought, in the episode. It's not played that way, but I just had that reaction to it. And of course, they create a Vulcan-human hybrid from Trip and T'Pol, and then they try and use that to scare everyone, and then they basically take their moon base, which is like a mining facility, they take it into space, land it on Mars near one of their defense units with a giant laser, and threaten to destroy basically everyone, if the aliens don't all leave Earth. So I found it really, really more disturbing now, today, with what's playing out. That seemed like it was science fiction 20 years ago, and it's happening today, except we haven't even, God knows how we'd handle actual aliens. But I'd like to think it would unify us and we'd learn, but it could go the other way. So that was Demons in Terra Prime. And this was really the final of the series. And Jolene was really upset about the fact that it wasn't. And I can kind of see why. They had the last scene. They had a lot of really strong scenes between T'Pol and Trip about this child that was created, because the child doesn't survive, and it was because of the genetic engineering, not because of the genetics itself. So there is hope that Vulcans and humans can have children. Of course, we know they can because Spock is born. But it was fairly sad and hard to watch these scenes play out, and I wouldn't really want it to be the last episode of the series. I see why Jolene wanted it to be, but I'm glad they did do These Are the Voyages. I love These Are the Voyages, and I know a lot of people don't, and I always felt guilty because how the other actors felt about it, and particularly Jolene and that, because I didn't say that I loved it. So yeah, it was a love letter to Star Trek fans as a whole. It was bookending the whole of the Berman era, and basically what they did was, I thought it was good because they had this idea, and the idea was, how do we tell basically the story of Enterprise that we couldn't finish because we can get to do the seasons that we wanted. So they told it as a holonovel in a Next Generation episode, which bookended, Next Generation started, Next Generation ending. But the good thing about it was two things. One, they did show how the series ended. They got to jump forward and show a lot of things and do more than what they probably could have done in one episode of Enterprise. But they also, that's what a lot of people had a problem with, because you had the characters basically playing holograms. There's moments where they just freeze while Riker's doing his thing. And I kind of get why they were upset with that, but at the same time, you get to see what you wouldn't have seen. You get this overall conclusion to it all, and it also legitimizes the show, because what it says is, this is not an alternate universe, because some people are saying, when the Borg went back in the past, they changed the future, and this is a different reality, and that's why it's different. And a lot of people are using things like that, and I'm like, no, Enterprise fits fine. There's a few little things that are a bit off. You have to stretch a little bit to accept, but it works. It doesn't break canon. It just bends it a little bit. It doesn't throw it out like Discovery does, or break it like Strange New Worlds. But by having the Next Generation era show that, yes, this is, Archer and that were, in our timeline, in our universe, and they were the past, and this is what happened, and they can go back and just look at horror stories about it. But at the same time, because it's a horror story, it isn't actually what happened. We're not actually seeing what happened at the time, so we could go back to it, and we don't have to stick to Trip dying the way he did and all that. All those things, they left themselves with some freedom because it's not really what happened, but we got to see what happened, and we also got to acknowledge that, for the next generation to acknowledge that this was our past and it was all the same universe. They're all part of the same family. So I really liked that episode. I love it. I thought it really worked. And of course we get to see the Enterprise again, the Enterprise D, and we see the Enterprise D sets, and they look just as good in widescreen with the Enterprise lighting back in 2005. That any idea that the original series or the Next Generation has to be redesigned or can't be kept, aside from a little bit of extra detail to deal with the HD, they really hold up just fine. So I'm going to leave it there. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you thought of Season 4 of Strange New Worlds. Strange New Worlds. The original series. God, what am I doing? But that's what this reminds me of. Enterprise, it's up there with the original series for me. And I love that they did go back to that stuff at the end and validate it. But the other thing about that was it was sad to see it go, because they could have done another couple of seasons, and we could have had more good Star Trek. We could have had an actual Captain Pike series where we actually had the real Enterprise and everything, and expanded on that, and developed that, and got to see more of the ship and a more sophisticated, Enterprise and technology. There's so much promise that was there in Enterprise Season 4 that didn't get recognised, and then it was the end, and it was just the end. It was a little bit hard as I was getting there. I was like 4 episodes in. I'm like, oh my God, the next 2 episodes is the last story, second last story. It's like, it's almost over. I kind of didn't want it to end because, like I said, when it ended the first time, there was hope there'd be more, but now we know there isn't. So it's a bit harder. But I'm really going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you thought of Enterprise Season 4.